is Candace Williams, and I'm the Director of Policy and Research at the New England Board of Higher Education. And today we're conducting the fourth of 6 state presentations based on our recent initiative, Upskilling New England, Bridging the Gap Between Educators and Employers. Today we'll share data and findings focused on Massachusetts. And as you can see, I'm joined, or as you may be able to see, I'm joined by Charlotte Pizer, Policy and Research Analyst at the New England Board of Higher Education, as well as Kathleen Manning, the Dean of the Center for Workforce Development and Continuing Education at Quinsigamond Community College, Dr. Kathy Wrench, the Associate Vice President for Strategic Academic and Workforce Initiatives at Quinsigamond, and Teresa Rowland, who is the Vice President of Sector Strategies at Commonwealth Corporation. I'll start by saying just a few words about the New England Board of Higher Education, or NEBHE as we call it. NEBHE works to support the 6 New England states to address common challenges and bring action to shared opportunities in higher education and workforce development. In mid-2019, which seems like forever ago, NEBHE launched Upskilling New England, Bridging the Gap Between Educators and Employers, with support from Strada Education Network. We convened stakeholders from across the region to identify the need for upskilling and challenges related to implementing such programs, to reveal best practices in developing and delivering upskilling programs and partnerships, and bolster these efforts with recommendations for state policy. We plan to share our findings through this webinar with a particular focus on Massachusetts, as I said, but in the coming weeks, we'll release additional webinars with partners from other New England states, and you can find our previous conversations with partners from Maine, Vermont, and Rhode Island on our website. So feel free to pop your questions into the question and answer tab. We'll answer them at the end of the presentations, and we'll also be sure to share our slides with you all after the presentation too. So to jump in, I'll note that the white paper on which this webinar is based was largely authored prior to the onset of COVID-19. And while the implications of the findings we'll share have always been significant, we believe that they are now more important than ever. Among our discoveries, we noted that the populations most in need of upskilling are the least likely to receive them. The economic shock caused by the spread of coronavirus has only accelerated the vulnerabilities of these individuals, most notably un- and underemployed, low-wage, and hourly workers throughout the country and New England. According to Strada, in its regular public viewpoint survey, less than half of Americans have access to the training they would like to receive. We have yet to fully understand the impact of COVID-19 on our lives moving forward and the economy, and we also are still uncertain about how our states and federal government will continue to respond in terms of financial support for education and training providers or policies on job creation. If we use the Great Recession as a barometer, we can estimate that post-secondary education institutions, especially community colleges, will likely bear much of the weight for preparing individuals to get back to work and fill new types of jobs. In New England, employment rates peaked at an average of 9% in 2010, and 2-year colleges experienced an 8% increase in enrollment. Notably, this period also represented an inflection point where the number of sub-baccalaureate program completions, such as certificates, in demand-driven sectors like biomedical sciences, computer science, precision production, and others, more than doubled across the region. So it's possible we could see similar patterns arise, or that they are arising in the near future as the economy recovers. Surveys by NEBHE and by Strada alike show an interest in short-term training programs among adults. And of course, our colleges and universities must be nimble, more nimble than they have in the past. They'll have to respond to the needs of a broader array of students, including adult learners who are likely to turn to these short-term online methods of gaining industry-validated knowledge and skills, and at the same time, collaboration between post-secondary education, employers, local and state governments must turn a new page to act quickly. We must prioritize the acquisition of in-demand, automation-resistant skills and credentials that lead to high-quality jobs by New England's out-of-work individuals and at-risk incumbent workers. And there are a number of factors at play alongside of the impact of the pandemic on our regional higher education landscape as well as the economy. For one, the age and demographics of the region call for new strategies to meet the fast-changing needs of the labor market and ensure the region remains a top choice for people to live and work. With fewer high school graduates entering the college and career pipeline, it's important we optimize existing human capital, un- and underemployed adults, individuals traditionally underserved by higher ed and workforce training, and recent immigrants. Massachusetts' projected number of high school graduates is estimated to decline by 8.6% by 2032, which is somewhat less than the regional average decline. And in states like Massachusetts, Rhode Island, and Connecticut, any population growth is powered by an increase in Black, Hispanic, and Asian populations. Across the region, higher education institutions, workforce training providers, and employers must work together to develop a system of learning that meets individuals where they are and allows for continuous upgrading of skills and knowledge. In doing so, we can bridge this gap between the supply and demand of adults that need post-secondary credentials. In Massachusetts, over 57.3% of adults have a post-secondary credential, while up to 72% of jobs in the state require one. And by credential, we mean a short-term certificate, an associate degree, a bachelor's degree, or higher and industry-recognized credentials. The share of people in Massachusetts with post-secondary credentials is above the national and regional average. We know this is a very highly educated state where more residents are likely to hold bachelor's and higher degrees than peers in other states. And the state does have a unique economy with a mix of industries that require specialized knowledge and skills. Relative to the rest of the country, Massachusetts has a high share of jobs in scientific research, footwear manufacturing, and colleges and universities. And some of our smaller industries that have been very traditional to the Massachusetts economy are in decline, such as fishing. This means that workers in traditional industries and those hardest hit by COVID-19 are looking to transition to new sectors and build careers there. We see that occupations requiring post-secondary credentials are among the fastest growing in Massachusetts, particularly in home health care, although it's important to note that these jobs are underpaid and undervalued by our society and labor market, as well as market research analysts, therapists and counselors, post-secondary teachers, and information technology workers. For example, the number of jobs in software development are expected to grow by 12% by 2029, over 8,000 new job openings, and the average wage for these jobs is well above $600,000 per year. So to make sure that Massachusetts can respond to the changing mix of growing industries and available jobs that are increasingly requiring digital skills, we need to increase access to and completion of post-secondary credentials for 400,000 individuals. And we'll come back to that figure. Those with a post-secondary credential in Massachusetts are more likely to live in Middlesex and Norfolk counties, the metro Boston areas, which are more affluent areas of the state. And it's also really important to note that Massachusetts sees significant attainment gaps based on race. Over 30 percentage points difference between Hispanic and white residents, and the attainment rate of Hispanic individuals is one of the lowest in the region at only 27% holding a post-secondary credential. Prior to the onset of COVID-19, 1 in 2 adults in Massachusetts perceive the need to pursue additional education. However, the impact of COVID-19 on people's employment status is changing the way they're thinking about new education and training opportunities. According to Strada and the weekly Public Viewpoint survey, 56% of Americans have either lost their jobs, had their hours or income reduced. 1 in 3 believe they would need more education to find a comparable job. And for millennials and the Generation X, this belief is most pronounced. And this mirrors trends in Massachusetts as well. The demand for career advancing education is particularly strong among young adults, and we might infer that they're responding to what they're seeing in the labor market. And there's also a bit of variation by attainment level as well, with the perceived need for additional education highest among those without a high school diploma. The group with the next highest perceived need for career advancing education is those with vocational or technical backgrounds. This group is more likely to see a direct relationship between what they learn in the classroom and its occupational application. Thus, they may value additional education at higher rates than others. Now, we said an additional 400,000 people in Massachusetts must complete a post-secondary credential to meet the attainment goal. Or to meet the required attainment level for the job demand. If we apply this survey data, we can count over 1.2 million adults without post-secondary education experience in Massachusetts who perceive the need for additional career-connected education. And digging deeper allows us to confirm additional hypotheses. As population growth among the white population slows, and attainment gaps hold back the state's vitality, education and training opportunities should respond to the needs of Black, Hispanic, and Asian individuals. 3 in 5 Black people and Hispanic people see the need for additional education in Massachusetts. Furthermore, individuals working in healthcare and manufacturing are apt to see the need for additional education and training. So, how do colleges and employers alike respond? There's a lot of opportunity to set conditions now to support Massachusetts employers and build upon the demand for career-connected education and training. At this point in the COVID-19 pandemic, many conditions linked to the recommendations that we've made in the white paper already exist. We've learned that given the needed tools and resources, individuals can adapt quickly to digital methods of teaching, learning, and working, although we can certainly improve in a number of areas. Current and prospective students' expectations of higher education are changing. Deficiencies in our labor market have been revealed such that the need for transparent education and career pathways is clarified, and that we can no longer ignore inequities faced by people of color and low-wage hourly workers. So, all that said, we believe upskilling is a key strategy to meet the needs of current and future members of our workforce, our employers, and our higher education institutions. And with that, I will turn it over to Charlotte to discuss the findings of our initiative and the white paper.
Thank you very much, Candace. So, with that as a foundation, let's talk about what upskilling actually is. In the fewest words, to upskill is to gain additional or alternative skills that will translate to advancement in the workforce. The Aspen Institute's Upskill America initiative defines upskilling by 3 key opportunities and outcomes: employer training, credentials, and college degrees. Upskilling via employer training refers to employers providing or partnering with education institutions to provide retraining and upskilling opportunities for incumbent workers. Upskilling can also take place by way of attaining a credential of value or a verification of an individual's skill level or qualification by a third party like a trade association. Lastly, an individual may upskill by attaining a college degree, ideally with the financial assistance of his or her employer. Upskilling is important across sectors. For workers, upskilling can directly translate to increased wages and/or a promotion. For employers, upskilling is an important tool to enhancing work product and retaining workers. Additionally, it is more cost-effective to upskill an incumbent worker than to recruit a new employee. Educators benefit from upskilling because by forming partnerships with employers, they not only assist their students in job placement, they also make themselves a more sustainable institution because through innovative program development and successful partnerships with within industry, institutions widen their application pools. Policymakers play a crucial role in upskilling through creating policies supportive of the aforementioned entities and most importantly, our labor force. But also by creating policies that support the creation and sustainability of upskilling programs, policymakers open educational opportunities to more citizens who in turn make greater contributions to our economy. The next question is, where should upskilling take place in order to be most effective? According to the Strada Consumer Insights data, New England adults are extremely likely to enroll in education and training through their employer. The next most desired source of education is community college, then four-year college. So if employers develop upskilling programs or partner with education providers to develop upskilling programs, workers are more likely to take advantage, acquire higher level skills, increase their wages, contribute more to their employer, increase output, become a better consumer, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. In September 2019, NEBHE, with the support of Strada Education Network, convened a thinkers meeting. At the meeting were representatives from colleges and universities, employers both large and small, state policy, industry associations, workforce boards, and other stakeholders. Through robust discussion around best practices and opportunities in the upskilling space, we came up with 3 models for upskilling, which can of course be tailored to individual businesses or education providers of varying sizes. As we've emphasized, the implementation of these models is of increasing importance in our current circumstances. Partnerships between employers and education providers will be especially pertinent when we begin or continue to return to normalcy and rebuild our economy. So the first model is in-house upskilling. This model works best for large employers with significant resources to dedicate to building and sustaining education and training programs on site. Companies like Amazon and JetBlue have strong in-house upskilling programs, and a bit closer to home, Chimbro Institute in Maine is an exemplar of the in-house model. Chimbro offers high school internships, safety development training, professional trade and craft skills development, apprenticeships, leadership and professional development programs, the list goes on. All of these programs are tailored to invest in the long-term development and retention of talented, capable leaders at all levels of the company. And that comes directly from their website. The second model is a direct employer to institution partnership. Here, an employer seeks the partnership of an institution or vice versa to develop a curriculum or program which can be customized or already existing that directly correlates to the employer's skills gaps. The Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center in Massachusetts partnered with Bunker Hill Community College to do exactly this. This partnership, called the Employee Career Initiative, delivers free prerequisite courses for careers in allied health. Beth Israel developed these courses with Bunker Hill, who offers them on site, meaning workers do not have to leave the hospital in order to take classes. The model can work well for mid-sized employers and community colleges that have the capacity to develop customized programming when necessary or travel to deliver on-site programs. The third is an industry-led partnership where an intermediary, which can be a workforce board, an industry association, or the like, helps to connect employers and educators and build and sustain the partnership and subsequent upskilling programs. The Eastern Advanced Manufacturing Alliance, or EMA, is an excellent example of this. EMA is a collective of manufacturing businesses in Connecticut, Massachusetts, and Rhode Island, and has established itself as a nonprofit organization and intermediary for member organizations and partnered education providers. EMA reviews its community college partners program offerings to ensure they align with current manufacturing industry needs. It advocates for supportive policies for the advanced manufacturing workforce pipeline and is a resource for best practices for employers and education providers. Since integrating employers into the educational pipeline is not a practice universally implemented by educational institutions yet. We've narrowed the role employers play into 4 concrete arenas. The first is assessing workforce skills gaps so that they may accurately articulate openings for upskilled or upskilling employees. The second is to form partnerships through one of these models previously mentioned, or build an educational program in-house. The third is to invest in or elevate existing high-quality, effective upskilling programs. With this investment comes the responsibility to advertise upskilling opportunities to employees. We learned from the meeting that we hosted in September that many employees who offer tuition benefits, for example, do not actually track who is using them. And much of the time, employees don't actually know that that benefit exists for them. On top of all of that, tuition reimbursement is not always the most helpful benefit for upskilling because it does not mitigate the upfront cost of college. So we have to rethink this more traditional benefit and elevate the more innovative models that we've touched on. Lastly, the fourth role is to standardize skills language. This will be most effective when developed in collaboration with education partners so that job skills and course outcomes are aligned in such a way that the pathway from an educational training program to a job is clear both to the student, the institution, as well as the employer. We're now going to move on to some recommendations for state policy solutions. In our white paper, we articulated 3 buckets of policy recommendations, which are delivery models, partnerships, and state policy. But for the purposes of this webinar, we're going to focus on those state policy recommendations. It's important to note here that we created these recommendations with an equity lens. And in fact, we believe these recommendations actually facilitate increased equity and inclusion in upskilling programs. So the first policy recommendation is to implement policies that require validation of prior learning or expansion of validation of prior learning. By recognizing and documenting prior learning, whether through work experiences, military experience, or previous academic experience, education providers can shorten time to in-demand credentials, which workers can achieve through upskilling programs. We're going to focus on college credit for heroes, which is specifically for military veterans, but we believe this model can be translated and scaled well for non-military individuals and programs. So College Credit for Heroes was initiated in 2011 and is intended to maximize awarded academic credit for military experience. It is built on 2 primary pillars: an extensive network of participating schools, which is currently at over 50 colleges and systems in Texas, and the development of accelerated curricula. The Texas legislature allocated $5 million to the launch of the program in 2011 and was made permanent in 2015 through SB 806. CCH has completed thousands of evaluations of military experience, which has resulted in an average of 25 college credits per veteran. Codification of this initiative has significantly increased participation of institutions, which has in turn increased student participation. The second policy recommendation is to develop accessible, transparent, and stackable credential pathways so that all stakeholders can easily understand how upskilling programs translate to promotional structures and post-secondary credentials. In 2019, Vermont enacted H533, which requires the Department of Labor to collaborate with post-secondary education and training providers, government agencies, and employers to recruit adults into educational training programs, and also to locate funding subsidies for participants, as well as map pathways from high-value credential programs to high-quality job outcomes. The last policy recommendation is for policymakers to implement incentives for employers to prioritize upskilling as a key business strategy through state-issued grants or tax breaks. An example of this is the Massachusetts Workforce Training Fund, a program out of the Massachusetts Executive Office of Labor and Workforce Development, as well as the Commonwealth Corporation, which Teresa will expand on in a second. Organizations can apply for grants for up to $250,000 to train current and newly hired workers in topics like project management, software and IT skills, and machine setup and operation. The model works well because not only is it government supported, but businesses must pay into membership dues, and for-profit companies automatically pay into the fund. So there's widespread knowledge of this resource. I will turn it over to Teresa to expand on this and to talk more about how Commonwealth Corporation contributes to the upskilling space in Massachusetts.
Great, thanks, Charlotte. And thank you so much for inviting me to join today. It was great to once again hear that summary of your approach and your recommendations, and I felt like I was doing lots of nodding throughout, so thank you for that. And Charlotte, are you gonna launch my other deck, or perfect?
Yes.
Great. Awesome, thanks. As for those of you who don't know, ComCore, and we invest in innovative partnerships with industry, education, and workforce organizations to prepare youth, unemployed, and underemployed individuals for new positions and wage gains. And so today I wanted to talk about 3 programs that folks might be familiar with, but just to kind of do a recap that I think are all ways in which we're investing in upskilling of workers. And I think, particularly what's on our mind and how we have these 3 programs support is really around how women and people of color have been most impacted by the economic impacts of COVID. Please hold on one second. This is the joys of having the children home. Wednesday is a half day in remote learning world, so they're all loud. My apologies. So we are concerned with women and people of color, especially since they were employed, largely by industries that have faced an economic impact and downturn. So all of our programs really, we're not set out to focus on certain industries or really have those in mind. Next slide, Charlotte. Thanks. So first off, in terms of the Workforce Training Fund, the Workforce Training Fund was established in 1998. And this is a fund that Massachusetts employers pay into a surcharge on unemployment insurance. And so it actually comes to about $18 to $22 million annually for incumbent worker training. And so those same employers can then go and apply for grants to access the fund. And the dollars are really about promoting job growth, job retention, or increased wages for the workers, while also improving business productivity, competitiveness, and just the ability to be competitive and do business in Massachusetts. Next slide. So we have 3 program models that fall under the Workforce Training Fund umbrella, with I'll asterisk a 4th one that came up temporarily during COVID. So first is the Express program, and this is a program where up until September 1st, it was just small businesses could access, but since September 1st, now all size businesses can access. It is off-the-shelf training, which means training providers have to register their courses in a database, and then a business can apply to receive 50% reimbursement for any of those training off the shelf. They have to apply in advance and be approved, so we can set aside the resources for them. But then once they've completed training, they can come and ask for their 50% reimbursement. And that's up to $30,000 per year that businesses can access. The Small Business Direct Access Program is just focused on small businesses with 100 or fewer employees. And this is pre-procured training that Commonwealth Corporation has procured. We have a list of 130 pre-approved courses, and it is free to small businesses. And so they directly contact the training provider to register for the course and enroll, but they don't pay a thing. Then there is the general program, which is for companies of any size, and this is like the big grant. This is up to $250,000 for 2-year customized training plans, where they're really looking at an org-wide shift. And this is where it's really driven at. They have some sort of business productivity or competitiveness challenge or goal that they're trying to address. I like to give the example of the scrap metal. Like if you think about manufacturers, and I know Kathy, you've had a lot of interaction with this around being able to reduce scrap within a manufacturer and all the continuous process improvement training. So a business might set out to say, everybody needs to know this within our organization and everyone needs to contribute. Some folks might need a higher skill level, some might need less, but it's all meant to improve the business competitiveness, but also be able to focus on helping all employees have some base level understanding of what continuous process improvement is, so they can apply that in their current work, but also for the future. Next slide. So we are lucky in that we just had our annual report that was published. And so these are our summary of our grants awarded in 2020, which I'll touch upon, and also some of the changes that we had related to COVID. So in FY20, so we do, July to June, we approved $20 million in training for Massachusetts businesses. Most of that, right, 19.9 is all grants made from the Express of the general program, and about 773 is the value of the training that the businesses received participating in direct access program. There's also the manufacturing emergency response grant, which is what I mentioned on the previous slide as our little asterisk of our fourth program. And we recognized when there was a lot of manufacturers in March that were pivoting to develop personal protective equipment, and they were working with the manufacturing emergency response team at the state level to understand what changes they would have to make in their manufacturing environment to be able to produce that, and they were getting technical assistance. We realized that there was also a cost associated with training of workers for that pivot, and it might have just been cross-training, new staff, or it might have been bringing in outside training providers, but there was a cost. And so we set up a program where businesses who applied for a manufacturing emergency response grant, either for equipment or capital, could also apply for resources for workforce training. So so we have, we set aside 1 million of that, and we're continuing to award that to grants throughout the year. Have had some uptick in that. So that was it was a really nice way of being able to pivot to an industry need within related to COVID. And the stat on this bottom really just, the question around like, well, how did COVID impact the Workforce Training Fund and businesses accessing this? So what was interesting is, there, as you can see, for the number of folks trained, the amount awarded and the businesses served, there was a small decrease, for each of these between 2019 and 2020. However, really we were on track to exceed these numbers. If you kind of just stripped out the last quarter of the year, we were on, businesses were all in trying to focus on upskilling of their workers and meeting their business productivity and competitiveness. I think some of the slowdown happened with businesses who had just wanted to take a moment to figure out what this all meant for their workforce. And so I don't think the commitment changed at all. I think there were businesses who are current grantees who were trying to figure out, could they move training remotely? Were they going to wait until folks could come back into their building? Even for manufacturers, for example, who were considered still essential, did folks have the mental bandwidth to deal with this when they were dealing with everything else going on in their lives? And also, I think just the reality of even when training could happen in person again, maybe you didn't have 20 people in a class anymore. You may have had to do two different cohorts of 10 each. So there were definitely changes that businesses are adapting to, but I think we have continued to see their high level of commitment in terms of investing and upskilling of their workers. Next slide. Great, and then on the left here, I just have some common topics that I won't touch on, but I think sometimes it's always really helpful to see what folks have in mind. And on the right, something that we're super proud about is just really about, we've always seen job growth among the businesses that are receiving grants to be higher than state and national. But this, the year in particular, with such a drastic, a decrease and fall at the national and state level in jobs, which we all understand why, we still saw an increase among Workforce Training Fund grantees. So really proud of that, and really I think speaks to the investments that businesses are making. Next slide. This is I just wanted to give you an example, and I know if you've seen our research, we do a lot of, manufacturing and a lot of professional services type of examples. This is a great example around community teamwork in Lowell that probably everyone's familiar with. they were doing leadership and communication training around how to make sure that they were best serving their customer. And so this is a company example where they pivoted. They were actually working with Middlesex Community College. They pivoted to offering online Zoom training. I think folks said, you know, it was great. It was great kind of within the context of COVID to get together. And this is actually a course where the managers were able to reflect on how to even manage a remote team. So they were able to kind of even pivot their training and both their delivery and their topics to be able to be real time. Next slide. So now I want to just talk about the Workforce Competitiveness Trust Fund, which we normally consider our pipeline program at ComCore, but I think it's so important because it really, from the upskilling perspective of focusing on the impact of an employer partner coming together. You know, the Workforce Competitiveness Trust Fund was created in 2006 and an economic development bill. And the purpose is really to support the development of employer and worker responsive programs. That's really meant to help advance workers, but also meet the demand needs of businesses. And this is a critical tool that we have in Massachusetts to help workers reskill. Even more critical now, I think, if you think about all the folks who are currently out of work and they need to do their own upskilling. You know, they had a good job and now they need to consider some other path. And so this requires a partnership of at least 2 employer partners with similar workforce needs. And while it does allow for incumbent worker training, since we have such a strong model with the Workforce Training Fund, we have typically used this to focus on our pipeline training. And it allows grants of up to $500,000, and it requires a 30% match from the partnership. And just to kind of call out, like, the role of the employer is both to identify the workforce need, work with the program, and I know Kathy have been part of a lot of these grant proposals, help partner with the training provider to understand what their needs are, what the training requirements are, but then to make a commitment to, you know, interview and hire folks that come out of the program. So it's a very active engagement on the part of the employer. Next slide. And here I just wanted to just show you how robust this investment in this program has been over the years. So since the creation of the program in 2006, there has been $38.5 million appropriated for this program. Next slide. And that has translated into grants to more than 100 partnerships across the state. Many of those partnerships have been sustained or have evolved into something else. We've trained more than 8,000 individuals, and we're really proud that we work with such great partners that have been able to achieve a 74% placement rate for folks. So they're really thinking about the training, but they're thinking about all the other wraparound support services that individuals need to make sure that they can persist in training and transition to employment. Next slide. This is my final slide, and this is something new for ComCore that I wanted to just talk about because I think it is another good example of upskilling. You know, a few years ago, Governor Baker asked ComCore to organize and lead his Commission on Digital Innovation and Lifelong Learning. And the purpose of the commission was to focus on the need for lifelong learning and to make recommendations for how the state should best focus their resources. And so we all certainly know that, you know, as we've talked about, you need additional skills, whether it's you know, a credential or a further education in order to advance in your job. And we also know, probably even more so today than, you know, we're more realized today than it probably was even a year ago, that we're all juggling our families and lots of other, our day-to-day job, our family. So if you're a current worker, you have to find a lot of motivation, and you have to find the right flexible mechanism for you to be able to participate in training and to be able to advance. And so while we have a lot of those great models, you know, within Massachusetts and at ComCore, you know, the commission's conversations really identify that there is more work that we can continue to do to evolve and come up with additional innovative approaches that we can ensure are meeting the needs of working adults. And so we specifically focused the commission recommendations around healthcare, because that's a priority sector for Massachusetts, and wanted to just put a stake in the ground and start somewhere. And so based on those recommendations, and with the support of the Workforce Competitiveness Trust Fund and a grant from the Strada Education Network, we launched the design of 3 pilot programs that are going to develop and deliver competency-based education programs. And we are working with a national expert, Charlotte Long, with the Competency-Based Education Network, to work hand in hand with our 3 pilot grantees to focus on delivering technical assistance. We started off in March with a 6-month plan. We've all delayed that a little bit with COVID, but to roll out and deliver technical assistance sessions to each of our 3 pilot programs to help them really take their traditional classroom education experience and transition that to competency-based program, working with employers, which really required, the first session we had employers who were sitting there looking at competency-based, maps and making decisions around, like, what are the competencies that we need for, in the case of Holyoke Community College, like a pharmacy tech, right? So what are those competencies, and really breaking them down into what we both, the occupational skills and also what we consider, the soft skills. And so we're kind of on this path for a 6-month program, but really the intent is to help current healthcare workers be able to advance in their job through these competency-based programs. So this is a new model for us, and we've done this before. We're learning a lot, and we're really excited once we get through the design process to be able to share with folks in the larger field what we've learned, and also share the curriculum. And then we will be recruiting individuals from healthcare employers to participate in these programs. And so we're, in addition to Holyoke, we have Westfield State is focusing on addiction counselors, and UMass Online is focusing on practice assistant. So really excited about this model, and to come back and talk with you all, and appreciate the opportunity to share some of our upskilling initiatives today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Teresa. We will just hop right back into chat a little bit about initiatives going on at Quinsigamond Community College. So Kathy Manning, I will turn it over to you, and I'll share my screen now.
Great, thanks so much. And just for all the employers and the education providers that are on the call, if you are not working with Commonwealth Corporation currently, put it on the top of your to-do list, because they are a great partner in terms of investing in your workforce. So that being said, I want to talk a little bit about a strategy for upskilling that Quinsigamond has started to use, and that is apprenticeships. So apprenticeships are not new. They've been around in some form or other, going back to, the ancient times, but they have evolved. When this country first started, we had a very strong trade-based apprenticeship program where you would have a master craftsman work with an apprentice to sort of bring them along to ensure that there was a skilled worker to take the place of the master craftsman when they were no longer working. And we have sort of seen that follow through today, where we still have very strong trade-based apprenticeship programs in construction and in electronics and in plumbers and very skilled trade-based occupations. What we are now seeing is we're seeing other industries like healthcare and finance and advanced manufacturing recognizing that apprenticeships are a valuable way to ensure they have a skilled workforce and that they have a ready supply of people ready to take the jobs that they have open. So, right now there are approximately 150,000 businesses that have apprenticeship programs with over 400,000 apprenticeships across the country. And the nice thing about an apprenticeship is that it does tend to give people a higher wage. So could I have the next slide, please? So there are a lot of reasons why people will look at the apprenticeship model. And what we saw in the recent months preceding COVID-19 was there was an intense competition for talent. Unemployment was at an all-time low, I think 2 or 3%, where employers just could not find the talent they needed to fill critical positions. So many of them looked at the apprenticeship model as a way to stand out, as a way for an individual to look and say, do I want to take the job with employer A or employer B, where I'm going to actually be able to earn money while I'm learning the trade. But there are a number of other different reasons why people look at apprenticeships, jobs with high turnover, which we're going to talk about a little bit in the Mass Restaurant Association apprenticeship that we ran. We also have seen industries where they're experiencing the gray tsunami. There are just hundreds of employees that are imminently retiring and not a pool of people to take their place. So they're looking at apprenticeships. So I want to take a little bit of time to talk about what an apprenticeship is. So if I could have the next slide, please. So an apprenticeship, it's an arrangement that is a paid work component. So it is distinguished from a paid work externship or internship or co-op experience because the company is actually hiring you as an employee. So as you become an employee and enter an apprenticeship, you enter what's called a learn and earn model. So you start at a salary that's an entry-level salary based on the skill set that you know now. The apprenticeship then is a very formally laid out competency-based progression of skills that you learn that's accompanied by wage gains to get you from one level to the next. And that is what I love about this model is that it serves the individual that has to choose between providing for their family and getting a job and getting an education, because the two things happen simultaneously. So when we talk about that inequity of the minority population and women, this is a good way to mitigate some of those inequities. And so if I could have the next slide, please. So what is the ROI? Because companies always want to know, what is the ROI? If we're going to invest in hiring this person and having another employee mentor them and in a journeyman role and share their knowledge, what do we get out of that? So some of the things I've already touched on, that vacant job that they can't either fill or they fill and the person isn't able to do the job, the apprenticeship program really does get that employee retention rates up. And that churn and burn can be very expensive for a company to keep hiring people only to find they're not the right fit, go out, search again, and try again. It also opens the recruiting pool. So we have, in our earlier presentation, saw how many people don't have that post-secondary credential. This allows them to get that post-secondary credential in a combination of classroom learning and on-the-job learning, and that is key. And then one of the apprenticeship programs that is local here in New England, the Dartmouth Hitchcock Medical Center, they actually used a medical assistant apprenticeship program, and they found it nearly paid for itself within the first year. And Siemens was another one. They estimated a 50% rate of return on its apprenticeship program compared to hiring machinists just off the street. And they can range in price anywhere from $25,000 to $250,000. There's a lot of different factors that go into an apprenticeship depending on how many hours it might take to get a person from entry level to fully skilled. And that can be anywhere from 2,000 hours to 8,000 hours. So if I could have the next slide, please. So here's some of the key differences between an apprenticeship and a cooperative education. So you can have a paid cooperative education experience, but that person is technically a contract worker or a part-time worker. The apprenticeship says, we believe in you and we're ready to invest in you, and they bring you on as a full-time employee. And that is a key difference of apprenticeship versus cooperative education, which is the model that a lot of colleges are very familiar and comfortable with. It also offers that on-the-job experience with an experienced mentor. That was called a journeyman role in the trades, and it's still very much the same kind of thing where you have somebody that's mastered the craft of the job that's now imparting that knowledge or transferring that knowledge to the apprentice. And there's also a related training instruction component of an apprenticeship. You'll hear it called RTI, and that is a required component of any registered apprenticeship program. And there's a required minimum number of hours. It's 150 hours in Massachusetts, where you are going to take the classroom learning and you're going to marry it with what they're going to need on the job. And so that there's the two components working together, the OJT and the classroom learning. And again, the apprenticeship's very important component of apprenticeship. It is tied to wage increases with competency mastery. So as you progress up and you become more skilled, your wages reflect that new skill level. And it's a national portable credential. So the cooperative education, on the flip side, it's more academic credit based as its reward versus pay. And the on-the-job learning is a combination of company oversight with the faculty oversight. And the majority is completed the majority of the learning is completed to the co-op experience. A lot of colleges are comfortable with the co-op experience being at the capstone to a course or a credit degree. And it's usually 225 hours in duration, 15 hours a week for 15 weeks, as opposed to the lowest number of hours in an apprenticeship in Massachusetts is 2,000 hours of OJT and 150 hours of related training instruction. So there are some very different things that go into apprenticeship versus cooperative education. Next slide. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how this works. If I could have the next slide. So Quinsigamond Community College last year partnered with the Mass Restaurant Association on an apprenticeship program. And the reason that the Mass Restaurant Association needed an apprenticeship program is they were sort of a victim of, they all stole each other's talent. So if somebody left, they would cherry pick from a competitor, and there was just this constant, I'm gonna offer 25 cents more an hour, or I'm gonna offer a little bit higher salary, and they were never able to retain talent. And it gets very, very expensive to have to refill talent all the time. So they got together and they said, okay, this is what we're willing to do. We're willing to spend the time to co-develop the apprenticeship program with the educational institution. Because as the educational provider, we needed to know what are the competencies that you need in your managerial roles. And together we crafted the curriculum. They also committed to hiring the apprentices. So they said, yes, we are going to hire these people and we're going to pay them, which meant they paid them to learn on the job, but they also paid them when they came to QCC to do their related training instruction. So there was a real monetary commitment by these folks. They also committed to providing a skilled worker within their organization to be the mentor that oversaw the OJT that was happening. And more importantly, they also were the person that said, okay, I can check off and validate that this person through their on-the-job work is demonstrating this competency to the criteria that we set out in the planning phase. And that's also key. And then they also committed to the regular wage increases as a competency demonstration. So it was a real investment by the employers in their employees. And if you look at any of the studies that have come out recently, employer investment in an individual is a key factor for retention of employees. So it is also a retention strategy for employers. So our role at QCC was, again, to provide faculty with the relevant expertise to help co-develop that apprenticeship program. And then we provided the relevant related training instruction, or the RTI. And then the apprentice role was to also do their part, to come to class, to invest in the OJT, to listen to their mentor, and hopefully make the program successful so we can continue. So next slide. So we launched it in July 2019 with 12 apprentices from 7 different organizations, and 11 of the 12 completed the program this past July, which, when you think about that timeline, we were in the midst of COVID. COVID hit right at the end of this program. They all worked full-time and attended RTI at QCC, and they earned a bunch of national credentials that were given from various hospitality associations, but they also earned 10 college credits from QCC. So not only did they get that nationally recognized credential, they did get themselves on a career pathway to an associate's degree, and if they wanted to go on to a bachelor's degree through one of our articulation programs in hospitality. So it was a win-win. Next slide. So I just want to talk about a couple of the key components in just a little bit more detail. An apprenticeship is a real marriage between an educational institution and a business. And the business involvement is key. There is structured on-the-job training, and that is combined with related training instruction, along with rewards for the skill gains, and then a national occupation credential. Next slide. And again, this is whether or not it's a federal apprenticeship program or a state apprenticeship program, and all apprenticeship programs in Massachusetts are registered at the state level. They have to have these 5 components. Next slide. So the apprenticeship program, it is a clear path to prosperity, particularly for those that are struggling to balance work and job commitments. We do find that the majority of the students at Quinsigamond are working either full-time or part-time, and apprenticeship programs are a much better vehicle, allowing the individual to get that credential while still providing for their family. It is particularly important for single female head of households, and it is particularly important for the non-traditional student population. And the growth of this, I think, is a way to move the state forward and continue to become a leader in workforce. Next slide. And so I did also want to mention that because apprenticeships, they require the employer to hire the individual, they then become an incumbent worker, which would allow them to be trained with dollars from the Massachusetts Workforce Training General Fund. So again, here's my plug for you, Teresa, at the Commonwealth Corp, that there is state funding to offset some of the costs for apprenticeships. There's also federal grants, and then there's also private foundation grants that can provide money if you're looking to lift apprenticeship programs. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Kathy Wrench, who's going to talk a little bit about another sector-based training initiative that we have.
Hi, everybody. I'm going to try to abbreviate my comments a little bit because I'm conscious of time. But what I'd like to talk about, I want to draw your attention back to the report that Charlotte mentioned in her opening comments. In that report, one of the challenges that's identified are what's considered disconnected silos of education and training, and also a constrained capacity among the education providers as potential challenges or detriments to the growth of upskilling across New England. So what I'd like to discuss here is actually what I've considered to be a very effective state policy response within the advanced manufacturing sector that has really addressed these particular challenges by really encouraging partnerships across a region. In particular, I'm going to be talking about the Advanced Manufacturing Training Program, and I think in doing that, I'll be able to highlight state policy making, the encouragement of stronger partnerships, and also new delivery models. Next slide. Fortunately, I put a lot of hyperlinks in here, so I'm not going to go into as much detail. But what I want to say on this slide is Massachusetts started its work back in 2015 to look at, by first establishing a very strong partnership among 3 executive offices: education, housing and economic development, and labor and workforce development. And that partnership in particular is impressive, but actually what's come out of that is even more impressive. I'm going to talk specifically about the advanced manufacturing the strategic plan for workforce development in that area, but know that there are other industry sectors that were also addressed in those plans. That planning process actually led to some key recommendations, as you can see here, and also some very strategic investments in how budget dollars were spent in terms of upgrading facilities at community colleges and at regional vocational technical high schools. Also skills upgrading and pipeline development activities, which I'll get into a little bit more on my next slide. But this essentially set the foundation for what I consider to be the care and feeding of a state level system that's designed to provide kind of career credentials and a career pathway within advanced manufacturing. Next slide. So the advanced manufacturing training program is actually it's a program that funds qualifying consortia to, as you can see, to develop and maintain an education and training system within a region. In Massachusetts, there are 4 of these consortia. The one that Kathy Manning and I are closest to is called Remake 4.0. And as we are here, there is a virtual job fair going on with Remake 4.0 today with, I think, 10 or 12 companies that are employers that have jobs today that are meeting with trainees of our programs and prospective employees. So as you can see, the services include all the wraparound services that help a student move not only from training but into a job as well. And as you can see, the partnership includes the high schools, the community colleges, the workforce boards, the employers. Next slide. And what's been really exciting about this is that it's really brought us together in a way that has encouraged collaboration and joint planning. So we work with Mount Wachusett Community College and with the several vocational technical schools in our region to plan our training so that it complements one another and it doesn't duplicate. And we're together looking at ways we can integrate more quality online content, especially since COVID hit in March. Along with hands-on training in commercial grade manufacturing equipment because it's been upgraded across the state in all of our facilities. You know, Kathy referenced stackable credentials in the hospitality industry. As you can see here, we have integrated many industry credentials across our programming, across our education and training providers, and really focused on credit for prior learning. So all of the kind of recommendations that came out of that report, I think are very much reflected in this state policy strategy in developing regional education and training consortia for advanced manufacturing. And I'll close my comments there.
Thank you so much to all of you who have spoken with us today. This has been so incredibly informative, and to see so much of our what we wrote about in our white paper really come to life through ComCorp, through QCC. It's really inspirational and hopefully will be a model to other organizations in our state and in our region. Because we are over time, we are not going to do a Q&A session. However, if you do have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us. Our contact is here. And this recorded webinar will be available on our website as well as the slides very shortly. So thank you all very much for joining us. And next week we are focusing on upskilling in Connecticut. So if you are interested in joining us for that, just look at our website or our Twitter and our registration links will be there. Thank you all very, very much.
Thank you.